The rain came down in sheets that turned Chicago's South Side streets into rivers of reflected neon and desperation. Isabel Moreno stood outside the obsidian tower on Michigan Avenue, her thin jacket soaked through, her entire body shaking from cold and terror in equal measure. She'd been standing here for 20 minutes, trying to gather the courage to walk through those gleaming glass doors. 20 minutes of watching expensive cars pull up to the valet stand, of seeing men in suits that cost more than her annual rent step out into the rain under umbrellas held by attentive doormen. 20 minutes of knowing that what she was about to do was insane, suicidal, the kind of desperate act that ended with bodies found in the Chicago River. But Sofia was gone. Her baby sister, barely 17 years old, had been missing for 6 hours now, and Isabel had watched it happen. She could still see it playing out in her mind like a horror movie stuck on repeat. Sofia walking home from her after-school job at the corner bodega, her backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, completely oblivious. The black SUV pulling up alongside her, the 2 men who'd gotten out, moving with practiced efficiency. Sofia's scream cutting off abruptly as a hand clamped over her mouth. The way her little sister's terrified eyes had found Isabel's across the crowded street, pleading, begging for help that Isabel had been too frozen to give. By the time Isabel's legs had remembered how to move, the SUV was gone, swallowed by evening traffic. She'd called the police immediately, babbling about a kidnapping, giving descriptions of the men, the vehicle, everything she could remember. The responding officers had taken her statement with the kind of weary resignation that told her exactly how seriously they'd take it. "Did you get a license plate number?" "No, it happened too fast." "Can you describe the men more specifically? Height, weight, distinguishing features?" "They were big, wearing dark clothes. I was across the street. I couldn't..." "And you're sure this wasn't just your sister getting into a car with friends? Sometimes teenage girls..." She was screaming. They grabbed her. But even as Isabel had insisted, she'd seen the doubt in their eyes. Another hysterical woman, probably a family dispute. Probably the girl ran away. Probably nothing worth dedicating resources to when they had real crimes to solve. They'd promised to file a report. Said they'd look into it. Told her to call if she heard anything. 6 hours later, Isabel had heard plenty. Because she'd gone back to the bodega where Sofia worked, had asked questions, had pushed until the owner, Mr. Kim, had finally pulled her into the back room and told her the truth she'd been desperately trying to deny. "Your sister," he'd said quietly, his weathered face drawn with something that looked like pity and fear. "She saw something last week. Something she shouldn't have seen." The bodega, Isabel learned, made of its money from a backroom operation. Nothing major, just a small-time loan shark setup, some bookmaking, the kind of neighborhood vice that the police ignored because it was run by people connected to bigger fish, people you didn't cross, people who worked for Dante Valenti. Sofia had been cleaning the storage room after hours when she'd stumbled onto a meeting, had seen faces, heard names, witnessed a transaction involving more money than Isabel made in a year. She'd been smart enough to back out quietly, to pretend she'd seen nothing. But someone had noticed. Someone always noticed. "They took her because she's a liability," Mr. Kim had said, his hands shaking as he spoke. "Valenti's people don't leave loose ends. I'm sorry, Isabel. I told her to keep her head down, to forget what she saw, but..." Isabel hadn't stayed to hear the rest. She'd run out into the rain, her mind racing, her heart hammering against her ribs hard enough to hurt. Dante Valenti. The name was whispered in their neighborhood with the kind of reverence reserved for demons and saints. He ran the South Side with an iron fist wrapped in expensive leather gloves. Protection rackets, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and rumors of darker things. The police couldn't touch him. The FBI had tried twice and failed. He was untouchable, unreachable, a ghost who controlled an empire from the shadows. But Isabel had learned something else about Dante Valenti from Mr. Kim, something that had sent her running through the rain to this obsidian tower in the heart of downtown Chicago. Something that had given her a thread of desperate, impossible hope. Dante Valenti had a code, an old-fashioned set of rules he supposedly lived by. No civilians, no women, no children. The people who worked for him knew these rules absolutely. Breaking them meant consequences that made prison look merciful. If Valenti's men had taken Sofia, if they'd kidnapped a 17-year-old girl, they'd done it without his knowledge or approval. They'd broken his most sacred rule. And if Isabel could just get to him, if she could just make him listen, if she could just convince him that his own people had violated his code, maybe, just maybe, he'd get Sofia back. It was insane. It was suicide. It was the longest of long shots. But it was the only shot Isabel had. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the gleaming glass doors of Valenti Tower. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with lighting so perfect it seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Isabel's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, announcing her presence like an alarm. She was acutely aware of how she must look, soaked to the bone, her cheap jacket dripping onto the expensive floor, her dark hair plastered to her face, her eyes red, from crying. The security guard behind the desk looked up, his expression shifting from bored to alert in half a second. He was built like a tank, with the kind of watchful stillness that suggested military training. "Miss," he said, his voice professionally neutral but with an undercurrent of warning. "Can I help you?" Isabel's mouth had gone dry. Up close, with the adrenaline starting to fade, the full insanity of what she was attempting crashed over her like a wave. What was she doing? You couldn't just walk into Dante Valenti's building and demand an audience. You couldn't just... But Sofia's face flashed through her mind. Her baby sister, with her infectious laugh and her dreams of going to art school, her sketchbooks filled with drawings of a life beyond their neighborhood. Sofia, who'd already been accepted to 3 colleges with scholarship offers. Sofia, who had a future that didn't include this life, this world, this darkness. Sofia, who was somewhere terrified and alone because Isabel had been too frozen to help when it mattered. "I need to see Dante Valenti," Isabel said, her voice coming out stronger than she felt. "It's urgent." The security guard's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or pity. "Mr. Valenti doesn't take walk-in appointments. If you have business to discuss, you can leave a message with, 'His men took my sister.'" The words burst out of Isabel like a confession, loud enough to echo in the cavernous lobby. 6 hours ago, they grabbed her off the street. She's 17 years old. She's just a kid. She didn't do anything wrong. She just saw something she shouldn't have seen. And now they have her, and the police won't help, and I don't have anyone else to turn to, and please... Her voice cracked. "Please. I just need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain. He has a code, right? No civilians, no women, no children. His people broke that code. They took my baby sister." The security guard was staring at her now, really staring, and Isabel saw something shift in his expression. He picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button, and spoke quietly into the receiver. "Yeah, it's Marcus at the front desk. I've got a situation here. Young woman, early 20s, claiming Valenti's people took her sister, 17-year-old, says it happened 6 hours ago." He paused, listening. "Yeah, she's pretty upset. Soaked through, been crying. Doesn't look like press or law enforcement. Looks like..." Another pause. "Yeah, okay. I'll send her up." He hung up and looked at Isabel with an expression she couldn't quite read. 42nd floor. Elevators are to your right. Someone will meet you when you get off." Isabel's legs nearly gave out with relief. Thank you so much, Don't thank me yet," Marcus said quietly. "You're about to walk into a room with the most dangerous man in Chicago. If you're lying, if this is some kind of setup, they'll find pieces of you in 3 different states. Understand?" Isabel nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good luck, kid. I hope your sister's okay." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like it took both seconds and hours. Isabel watched the numbers climb, her reflection distorted in the polished metal doors. She looked like a drowned rat, like someone who had no business being in a building this expensive, talking to a man this powerful. But she was here. She'd made it this far, and she wasn't leaving without answers. The elevator doors opened onto a space that made the lobby look modest by comparison. The entire floor seemed to be one massive office, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's glittering skyline. The furniture was sleek and modern, all dark wood and leather. Artwork that Isabel suspected was original and priceless hung on the walls. A woman stood waiting by the elevator, her expression professionally neutral. She was in her 50s, dressed in an immaculate suit, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Everything about her screamed efficiency and control. "Ms. Moreno," the woman said, and Isabel wondered how she knew her name until she remembered. Of course they'd run a background check in the 30 seconds it had taken her to get up here. "I'm Catherine Hayes, Mr. Valenti's executive assistant. Please, follow me." Isabel followed Catherine through the office space, her wet sneakers silent on the thick carpet. She was aware of eyes on her, of people stopping their work to watch her pass. Men in expensive suits, women with cold, calculating expressions. All of them looked at her with the kind of professional assessment that made her feel like prey. Catherine led her to a set of double doors at the far end of the office. She knocked once, then pushed them open without waiting for a response. "Mr. Valenti," Catherine said, her voice crisp, "Ms. Isabel Moreno to see you." And then Isabel was walking into Dante Valenti's private office, and everything she thought she'd prepared herself for evaporated like mist. The office was massive, dominated by a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black walnut. Behind the desk, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows in the glittering city beyond, sat a man who radiated power like heat from a furnace. Dante Valenti was younger than Isabel had expected, maybe late 30s or early 40s, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. All sharp cheekbones and strong jaw, with dark eyes that seemed to see everything. His black hair was swept back from his forehead, showing the first hints of silver at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Isabel's entire year of college tuition. The jacket hung over his chair, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. But it wasn't his appearance that made Isabel's breath catch. It was the absolute authority in the way he held himself, the controlled stillness that suggested violence held in check by will alone. This was a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be obeyed, who could destroy lives with a phone call, who held the power of life and death over hundreds, maybe thousands of people. This was a man Isabel had just accused of kidnapping her sister. Dante Valenti set down the pen he'd been holding and looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Ms. Moreno," he said, his voice a deep baritone with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "My security team tells me you have a rather serious accusation to make. Something about my people taking your sister?" Isabel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. All the words she'd prepared, all the arguments she'd practiced in her head during the elevator ride, had abandoned her completely. Dante's expression didn't change, but he gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Sit down before you fall down. Catherine, get her a towel. She's dripping on my carpet." The command in his voice was absolute, and Isabel found herself sitting without consciously deciding to move. Catherine reappeared moments later with a plush towel, draping it around Isabel's shoulders before disappearing as silently as she'd arrived. "Now," Dante said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers, "you have 5 minutes to explain why you walked into my building making accusations that could get you killed. I suggest you use them wisely." The threat should have terrified her, and it did, somewhere deep in her bones where fear lived. But stronger than the fear was the desperate, clawing need to save Sofia. To fix the one moment when she'd frozen, when she'd failed to act, when she'd watched her sister disappear and done nothing. "My sister's name is Sofia Moreno," Isabel said, her voice shaking but determined. "She's 17 years old. She's a senior at Lincoln Park High School. She was accepted to the Art Institute with a full scholarship. She wants to be a graphic designer. Her voice caught. "She's the best person I know. And 6 hours ago, 2 of your men grabbed her off the street and threw her into a black SUV. Dante's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. "You saw this happen?" "Yes, I was across the street. I saw everything. 2 men, both big, both wearing dark suits. The SUV had tinted windows. They grabbed her right outside Kim's bodega on Halsted Street." Isabel leaned forward, gripping the arms of the chair. "I know why they took her. She works at the bodega part-time. Last week she was cleaning the storage room after hours and she walked in on a meeting. Your money. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see." "And you know this how?" Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. "Mr. Kim told me. After I called the police, and they basically told me there was nothing they could do, I went back to the bodega. I asked questions. He told me that Sofia had witnessed something, that she'd seen faces and heard names, and that she was now a liability." Isabel's hands were shaking. "But here's the thing, Mr. Valenti. Mr. Kim also told me about your code. No civilians, no women, no children. He said you had rules, that people who work for you know those rules, and that breaking them is the worst thing they could do." Dante was completely still now, his gaze fixed on Isabel with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her skull into her thoughts. "So I came here," Isabel continued, her voice gaining strength from desperation, "because if your men took my sister, they did it without your knowledge or your approval. They broke your rules. And I'm I'm praying that you care enough about those rules to help me get her back." The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. Dante didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there studying Isabel with those dark, calculating eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried an edge that made her shiver. "What makes you think I won't have you killed for walking in here and telling me that my organization is running operations out of a bodega on the south side? Because if you were going to kill me," Isabel said, surprised by her own courage, "Marcus would have done it in the lobby. The fact that I'm sitting here means you want to know more, which means maybe you don't know about Sofia. Maybe your people really did go rogue." A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. There and gone so quickly, Isabel almost missed it. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Ms. Moreno." "I'm desperate," Isabel corrected. "Sofia is all I have. Our parents died 3 years ago in a car accident. It's just been the two of us since then. I've been working 2 jobs to keep her in school, to keep us fed and housed. She's going to be the first person in our family to go to college. She's going to have a real future, a better life than what we grew up with." Her voice broke. "She's everything good about me, Mr. Valenti. Everything pure and hopeful and worth protecting. And if your men hurt her—" "They won't," Dante interrupted, his voice hard as iron. "Not if what you're telling me is true." He picked up his phone, pressed a button, and when someone answered, said simply, "Get me Luca. Now." While they waited, Dante's eyes never left Isabel's face. She had the uncomfortable feeling of being dissected, analyzed, cataloged. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him because he leaned back in his chair and asked, "Describe the men who took your sister. Everything you remember." Isabel closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that terrible moment. The first one was tall, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", built like a linebacker, bald head. He had a tattoo on his neck, couldn't see what it was from the distance. The second one was shorter, maybe 5'10", but whiter, stocky, dark hair, shaved on the sides. He was the one who grabbed Sofia. "What were they wearing?" "Dark suits. Nothing flashy, but they looked expensive. Leather jackets over the suits. The taller one had a gold watch. I saw it catch the light when he opened the SUV door." "The vehicle?" "Black Cadillac Escalade. Newer model, maybe last year or the year before. Tinted windows, black rims. I couldn't see the license plate." Dante nodded slowly, his expression growing darker with each detail. Before he could speak, there was a knock at the door, and a man entered without waiting for permission. This man was shorter than Dante, but built like a tank, with scars visible on his knuckles and a nose that had been broken more than once. He wore an expensive suit that couldn't hide the violence in his posture. When he saw Isabel, his expression shifted to confusion. "Boss," he said, his voice carrying a thick Southside accent. "You wanted to see me?" "Luca," Dante said, his voice deceptively calm. "This is Isabel Moreno. Her 17-year-old sister was taken off the street 6 hours ago. Black Escalade, 2 men, outside Kim's bodega on Halstead. The girl witnessed one of our operations last week. Ms. Moreno seems to believe my people took her sister to eliminate a liability." He paused, and something deadly entered his voice. "Tell me, Luca, do we have operations running out of Kim's bodega?" Luca's face went white. "Boss, Answer the question. Yes, small-time stuff, loans and bookmaking. Nothing major. I've got Rico and Dante running it." He stopped, his eyes widening. "Oh, Christ. Rico and Dante. They mentioned a problem last week. Some girl who walked in on a payment collection. I told them to handle it quietly, keep it low profile." "Did you?" Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. "Authorize them to kidnap a 17-year-old civilian?" "No, boss, no, I swear. I told them to make sure she kept her mouth shut, maybe scare her a little, but kidnapping—" Luca looked genuinely horrified. "That's against the code. You'd have my head if I authorized something like that." "You're right. I would." Dante stood, and the movement was so fluid, so controlled, that it was terrifying. "Call Rico and Dante. Tell them to come here immediately. And Luca, if that girl has a single bruise, if they've touched her inappropriately, if they've done anything except keep her somewhere safe, I will personally ensure they regret every second of their miserable lives. Are we clear? Crystal Boss." Luca was already pulling out his phone, backing toward the door. "And Luca?" Dante's voice stopped him. "You're suspended. Effective immediately. Your people went rogue on your watch. That's your responsibility." Luca's face crumpled, but he nodded. "Yes, boss. I understand." After Luca left, Dante turned back to Isabel. She was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white, tears streaming down her face. "Is she alive?" Isabel whispered. "Please, Mr. Valenti, is Sofia alive?" "If my men have any sense of self-preservation, yes," Dante said. He moved around the desk, and Isabel's body tensed automatically. But he didn't approach her. Instead, he walked to the windows, looking out over the city with his hands clasped behind his back. "I built this organization on rules, Ms. Moreno," he said quietly. "Not because I'm a good man. I'm not. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. But because rules create order, and order creates stability. And stability is good for business." He turned to face her. "No civilians, no women, no children. These aren't suggestions. They're absolute. Breaking them is the highest crime someone in my organization can commit." "Then why? Why did they do it?" Dante finished for her. "Stupidity, panic, fear of what I'd do if I found out they'd let a witness walk away. They thought kidnapping your sister was the lesser evil compared to having her potentially talk to the police." His jaw clenched. They were wrong. Isabel found herself believing him. Not because she was naive enough to think Dante Valenti was a good man. She wasn't. But because the cold fury in his voice when he talked about his rules being broken was real. This wasn't a performance. He was genuinely angry that his people had taken Sofia. "How long?" Isabel asked. "How long until we know where she is? Rico and Dante will be here within the hour. They'll tell me where she is, or—" He stopped, seeming to remember that Isabel was still a civilian, still someone who probably didn't need to hear the specific threats he was prepared to make. "They'll tell me," he finished simply. "An hour. 60 more minutes of not knowing if Sofia was okay, if she was scared, if she was hurt. 60 more minutes of the worst kind of helplessness." "I can't just sit here," Isabel said, standing abruptly. The towel fell from her shoulders. "I need to do something. "You need to sit down before you fall down," Dante said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You're shaking, you're soaked to the bone, and you look like you haven't eaten in hours. When was the last time you had food?" Isabel tried to remember. Breakfast? Maybe. Time had become elastic since she'd watched Sofia disappear. "That's what I thought." Dante pressed a button on his desk. "Catherine, bring food, something substantial, and coffee." He looked at Isabel. "You take cream? Sugar?" Isabel blinked, thrown by the sudden shift to mundane details. "Black is fine." Over the next hour, Isabel sat in Dante Valenti's office, drinking excellent coffee and forcing herself to eat a sandwich she couldn't taste, while the most powerful criminal in Chicago made phone calls and orchestrated the search for her sister. She watched him work with a kind of horrified fascination. Every word was precise, every command absolute. He ran his organization like a well-oiled machine, with people jumping to obey before he'd finished speaking. And throughout it all, he kept glancing at her, those dark eyes assessing, calculating, seeing things she wasn't sure she wanted him to see. "Ms. Moreno," he said during a lull between calls, "tell me about Sofia. What kind of girl is she?" The question surprised her. "Why do you want to know?" "Because," Dante said simply, "I need to understand what kind of person my people took. And because you're about to come apart from stress, and talking about your sister might help keep you grounded." He wasn't wrong. Isabel was barely holding herself together, operating on adrenaline and fear in equal measure. Talking about Sofia, remembering who her sister was beyond just a victim, might actually help. "She's brilliant," Isabel said softly. "Like, genuinely brilliant. She taught herself graphic design from YouTube videos because we couldn't afford classes. She's been creating artwork for local businesses since she was 15, saving every penny for college. She's kind. She volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. She wants to save the world, you know, if she actually believes she can make a difference. She sounds remarkable. She is." Isabel met Dante's eyes. "She deserves better than this life, better than this neighborhood, better than what our parents had. She deserves to be safe. And I failed her. I watched them take her, and I froze. I just stood there like an idiot while they—" "Stop." Dante's voice cut through her spiraling guilt. "You didn't fail her. You did exactly what you should have done. You survived, you gathered information, and you came here to get help. That's not freezing. That's being strategic. I should have screamed. Should have run after them. Should have—" "You would have died," Dante said bluntly. "Rico and Dante are dangerous men. If you'd tried to interfere, they would have put you down without hesitation. You'd be dead, and Sofia would still be missing, and no one would be looking for her because no one would know she'd been taken. He leaned forward. You did the smart thing, Isabel. The brave thing. You found the one person who could actually help, and you walked into a building full of people who could kill you and demanded that help. That takes more courage than chasing a car. Isabel hadn't thought about it that way. She'd been so consumed by guilt, by the image of herself standing frozen while Sofia disappeared, that she hadn't considered the alternative. Dante was right. If she'd tried to fight, she'd be dead. Before she could respond, the office doors burst open and 2 men were shoved inside by a mountain of muscle Isabel assumed was additional security. The 2 men were the ones from the street. She recognized them immediately. The tall, bald one with the neck tattoo, the shorter, stocky one with the shaved sides. Rico and Dante, presumably. Both men looked terrified, their eyes darting between Dante and Isabel with expressions that suggested they knew exactly how much trouble they were in. Dante stood slowly, and something about the movement made both men flinch. "Gentlemen," Dante said, his voice soft and deadly, "I believe you have something that belongs to Ms. Moreno here. I like it back. Now." Rico, the taller one with the neck tattoo, opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. His partner, the stocky man whose real name apparently wasn't Dante, looked like he might be sick all over the expensive carpet. "Where is she?" Isabel demanded, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "Where's my sister?" "Boss, we can explain," Rico started, but Dante held up one hand and the words died in his throat. "I asked you a question," Dante said, his voice still that terrifying whisper. "Where is Sofia Moreno?" "The warehouse," the stocky man blurted out. "The one on South Canal. She's in the back office. We didn't hurt her, boss, I swear. We needed to keep her quiet until we figured out what to do." "You needed to keep a 17-year-old civilian quiet," Dante repeated slowly, as if tasting each word. "A child. You kidnapped a child because she accidentally witnessed an operation that should have been conducted with enough discretion that civilians never got close enough to see anything." "She walked in on us," Rico protested weakly. "We didn't know she was there. The bodega owner was supposed to keep the storage room locked. So your solution was to grab her off the street in broad daylight, throw her in a vehicle, and take her to one of my warehouses?" Dante's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his controlled fury. "Did it occur to either of you that kidnapping a minor is a federal offense? That you've exposed this organization to exactly the kind of attention we spend millions of dollars avoiding? That you violated the most fundamental rule I have?" Both men were trembling now. Isabel watched with a kind of detached fascination as these 2 dangerous criminals, men who'd grabbed her sister like she was nothing, reduced to terrified children in front of Dante Valenti. "How long has she been there?" Dante asked. 6 hours? "About that, yeah," the stocky man confirmed. "We left Tony and Marco to watch her, make sure she didn't try anything stupid." "Tony and Marco." Dante closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. "So 4 of my men are now complicit in the kidnapping of a child. Excellent. Just excellent." He opened his eyes, and the look he gave Rico and his partner made Isabel's blood run cold. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Tony and Marco right now and tell them I'm coming to collect the girl. Tell them that if she has so much as a scratch, if she's been touched inappropriately, if she's been denied food or water or access to a bathroom, all 4 of you are going to learn exactly what happens when you break my rules." Rico's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. He made the call on speaker, and Isabel listened with her heart in her throat as he relayed Dante's message. Tony, whoever he was, sounded panicked on the other end. "Boss is coming himself?" Tony's voice crackled through the phone. "Oh, God. Rico, what did you do?" "Just make sure the girl is okay," Rico said, his voice breaking. "Make sure she's—" Dante took the phone from Rico's hand and spoke directly into it. "Tony, this is Dante Valenti. I'm going to be there in 20 minutes. When I arrive, Sofia Moreno will be unharmed, calm, and ready to leave with her sister. If she's not, you'll spend the rest of your very short life wishing you'd never heard my name. Understood?" "Yes, Mr. Valenti. Understood. The girl's fine, I promise. We gave her food, water. She's been in the office the whole time. We haven't touched her." "Good. Keep it that way." Dante ended the call and tossed the phone back to Rico. Then he turned to the mountain of muscle who'd brought the 2 men in. "Vincent, take these 2 to the holding room. I'll deal with them after I've retrieved Ms. Moreno's sister." "What about Tony and Marco?" Vincent asked, his voice a deep rumble. "They stay with the girl until I get there. Then we'll have a conversation about their future with this organization." The implication was clear. None of the 4 men had much of a future left. Vincent grabbed Rico and his partner, hauling them toward the door. As they passed Isabel, Rico looked at her with something that might have been remorse. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. We just didn't know what else to do." Isabel stared at him, all the fear and rage and helplessness of the past 6 hours crystallizing into something cold and hard in her chest. "You could have left her alone. You could have trusted that a 17-year-old girl who was terrified of what she'd seen wouldn't run to the police. You could have done literally anything except grabbing her off the street like she was nothing." Rico looked away, and Vincent dragged both men out of the office. After they were gone, Dante moved to a closet Isabel hadn't noticed, pulling out a long black coat. "We're going to get your sister now." Isabel's knees nearly buckled with relief. Thank you so much, Don't thank me yet," Dante said, his voice still carrying an edge. "We don't know what condition she's in. Tony said she's fine, but people lie when they're afraid." He shrugged into the coat, then looked at Isabel critically. "You're still soaked! Catherine!" The executive assistant appeared as if she'd been waiting just outside the door. "Yes, Mr. Valenti. Get Ms. Moreno something dry to wear, quickly." 5 minutes later, Isabel found herself in a bathroom that was larger than her entire apartment, changing into clothes that Catherine had somehow procured from thin air. Black pants that were slightly too long but fit well enough, a cream-colored blouse that was softer than anything Isabel had ever worn, and a black blazer that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Even the shoes, simple black flats, fit perfectly. When she emerged, Dante was waiting by, the elevator, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when he saw her, and something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe, or surprise at how different she looked in proper clothes. "Better," he said simply. Then into the phone. "I don't care what the Bianchi family wants. Tell them the answer is no, and if they push, they'll find out why no one pushes me." He ended the call without waiting for a response. The elevator ride down was silent. Isabel's mind was racing, caught between hope that Sofia was really okay and terror that this was all some elaborate trick, that she'd arrive at the warehouse to find— No, she couldn't think like that. Tony had said Sofia was fine. She had to believe that. "Ms. Moreno," Dante said as the elevator descended. "Isabel, once we have your sister back, we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that 4 of my men know your sister's face. They know where she works, where she goes to school, where you live. And while I'm going to ensure they never come near either of you again, there are protocols we need to follow. Security measures." Isabel's stomach dropped. "You're saying we're not safe." "I'm saying I'm going to make sure you are safe," Dante corrected. "But that requires some changes to your current living situation." Before Isabel could ask what kind of changes, the elevator doors opened onto the parking garage. A black Mercedes was waiting, engine running, with a driver Isabel recognized as Marcus from the front desk. "Marcus drives for you too?" Isabel asked as Dante opened the back door for her. "Marcus does whatever I need him to do," Dante replied. "He's former Secret Service. Very good at keeping people alive." They drove through Chicago's rain-slicked streets in tense silence. Isabel watched the city blur past the tinted windows, her hands clenched in her lap. Every minute felt like an hour. Every red light felt like a deliberate obstacle placed between her and Sofia. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Dante made several phone calls during the drive, his voice clipped and professional. Isabel caught fragments of conversation, something about cleaning up the mess, about severance packages, about ensuring this never happens again. She understood that he was systematically dismantling whatever operation had been running out of Kim's bodega, erasing evidence, protecting his organization from the exposure that Rico and his partner had created. "What's going to happen to them?" Isabel asked quietly. "Rico and the others?" Dante lowered his phone. "Do you want the truth? Or do you want me to tell you something that will help you sleep at night?" "The truth. They're going to disappear. Not permanently," he added, seeing Isabel's expression. "But they're done in Chicago. They'll be relocated, given enough money to start over somewhere else, and strongly encouraged never to come back. If they're smart, they'll take the offer and vanish. If they're not..." He shrugged. "Then they'll deal with consequences that are substantially less pleasant." "You're not going to kill them?" "I don't kill people for making mistakes," Dante said. "I kill people who are disloyal or who threaten the stability of my organization. Rico and his partner are guilty of stupidity and panic, not betrayal. They'll lose everything, their positions, their income, their homes, but they'll keep their lives." His voice hardened. "Assuming your sister is unharmed, If they've hurt her, all bets are off. The warehouse was exactly the kind of place Isabel had seen in movies, a sprawling brick building in an industrial area with loading docks and rusted metal doors, and the kind of isolation that made it perfect for hiding things you didn't want found. Marcus pulled the Mercedes up to a side entrance, and Dante was out of the car before it had fully stopped. Isabel scrambled after him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Dante moved through the warehouse like he owned it, which she supposed he did, navigating the maze of corridors and storage areas with the confidence of someone who'd been here 1,000 times. They reached a door marked office at the back of the warehouse. 2 men stood outside, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. When they saw Dante, they straightened to attention. "Mr. Valenti," one of them said nervously. "The girl's inside. She's fine, just like we said. We haven't touched her." Dante didn't respond. He simply pushed open the door and walked inside, Isabel right behind him. The office was small and cramped, with a battered desk, a few filing cabinets, and a couch that had seen better days. And there, sitting on that couch with her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped around them, was Sofia. Isabel's baby sister looked up when the door opened, her eyes red from crying, her dark hair tangled, still wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she was taken. But she was alive. She was whole. She was... "Sofia!" Isabel was across the room in seconds, pulling her sister into her arms, holding her so tightly she could feel Sofia's heart beating against her own. "Oh God, Sofia, are you okay? Did they hurt you? Are you—" "Isa." Sofia's voice was small, shaky, nothing like her usual confident tone. "Isa, what's happening? Who are these people? Why did they take me? I don't understand." "I know, baby, I know. It's okay. You're safe now. I'm here." Isabel pulled back just enough to look at her sister's face, checking for injuries. No bruises, no cuts, no visible signs of harm. "Did they touch you? Did they—" "No. They just kept asking me what I'd seen, what I'd heard, who I'd told. I said I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, didn't tell anyone, but they didn't believe me." Sofia's voice cracked. "Isa, I was so scared. I didn't know if you knew where I was. I didn't know if anyone was looking for me. I thought I was looking," Isabel said fiercely. "From the second they took you, I was looking. I found help." She gestured toward Dante, who'd been standing silently by the door, watching them. "This is Dante Valenti. He's—" Sofia's eyes went wide. "The Dante Valenti? The—" She looked at Isabel in horror. "Isa, what did you do?" "What I had to do to get you back." Dante stepped forward, and Sofia instinctively pressed closer to Isabel. He stopped immediately, keeping his distance, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Sofia Moreno," he said, his voice gentler than Isabel had heard it yet. "I owe you an apology. The men who took you were acting without my knowledge or authorization. They violated rules that are fundamental to my organization. What happened to you should never have happened, and I take full responsibility for their actions." Sofia stared at him, clearly trying to process the fact that one of Chicago's most notorious criminals was apologizing to her. You're sorry?" "Very sorry. And I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens to you again." He glanced at Isabel. "To either of you." "Can we go home now?" Sofia asked, looking between Isabel and Dante. "Please, I just want to go home." Isabel's chest tightened. Home. Their tiny apartment in a neighborhood that clearly wasn't as safe as she'd thought. The place where Rico and his partner knew exactly where to find them. "About that," Dante said, "I think we should have a conversation about temporary alternative arrangements." 30 minutes later, Isabel and Sofia were back in the Mercedes, driving through Chicago toward an address Dante had given Marcus. Sofia sat pressed against Isabel's side, refusing to let go of her sister's hand. She'd calmed down somewhat after Dante had personally brought her water and had one of his men fetch food from a nearby restaurant, but she was still shaking, still processing everything that had happened. "Where are we going?" Sofia asked for the 3rd time. "Isa, where is he taking us?" "Somewhere safe," Isabel replied, though she wasn't entirely sure herself. Dante had been vague about the details, saying only that he had a property that would be more secure than their apartment. Dante, sitting in the front passenger seat, turned to look at them. "I own a building in Lincoln Park. Secure, well-maintained, with doormen who actually pay attention. There's a 2-bedroom apartment on the 10th floor that's currently vacant. I'm offering it to you until we can ensure your permanent residence is safe." "We can't afford Lincoln Park," Isabel said automatically. "Our rent now is barely manageable, and that's—" You're not paying rent, Dante interrupted. This is temporary protective housing. Think of it as witness protection, except I'm not asking you to testify against anyone. Sofia looked at Isabel, her eyes wide. Isa, we can't accept this. He's the reason you're not still locked in that warehouse, Isabel said quietly. He's the reason those men are being dealt with. He's the reason we might actually be safe. She looked at Dante. How long are we talking? A few days? A week? Until I'm satisfied that there's no residual threat. Could be a week. Could be a month. Depends on how quickly I can ensure that everyone who knows about this situation understands the consequences of coming anywhere near either of you. The apartment building was exactly as Dante had described. A beautiful pre-war building with an actual doorman who tipped his hat when Dante walked in, with an elevator that worked perfectly, with hallways that smelled like furniture polish instead of garbage. The apartment itself was stunning. Hardwood floors, crown molding, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. The furniture was minimal but elegant, and everything was clean, modern, and completely unlike anywhere Isabel had ever lived. Sofia wandered through the space in a daze, touching things like she couldn't quite believe they were real. Isa, there's a washer and dryer. In the apartment. We don't have to go to the laundromat. I see that, baby. And look at this bathroom. Isa, the shower has 6 different settings. 6. Despite everything, Isabel found herself smiling at her sister's wonder. Sofia had always been easy to please, finding joy in small things. The fact that she could still be excited about a fancy shower after everything she'd been through spoke to her resilience. Dante stood in the doorway, watching them explore. When Isabel came back to the living room, he held out a set of keys. These are yours, he said. Front door, mailbox, storage unit in the basement. The building has 24-hour security, camera coverage of all entrances and exits, and the doorman has been briefed that you're under my protection. Anyone who comes looking for you will be turned away. Isabel took the keys, the metal warm from his hand. Why are you doing this? I mean, I know you said it's about your rules being broken, but this is above and beyond. Dante was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her face. When I was younger, not much older than Sofia, my family was targeted by a rival organization. My younger sister was 12. They took her to get to my father. His jaw clenched. We got her back, but not in time to prevent certain things from happening. Things that changed her. She was never the same after that. Isabel's heart clenched. I'm sorry. I can't imagine. She killed herself when she was 16, Dante continued, his voice flat. Couldn't live with what had been done to her, and I've spent every day since then making sure that no one in my organization, no one under my protection, ever has to experience that kind of violation. He looked toward where Sofia was still exploring the bedrooms. Your sister is alive. She's whole. She's going to recover from this, and I'm going to make damn sure she gets the chance to do that. The pain in his voice was real, raw, and Isabel felt something shift in her understanding of who Dante Valenti was. Not just a criminal, not just a dangerous man with a code, but someone carrying his own trauma, his own ghosts. Thank you, Isabel said softly, for everything, for listening, for helping, for her voice cracked. For giving me my sister back. Dante nodded once, then seemed to shake off the heavy emotion that had settled over them. There are some rules you need to follow while you're here. You don't leave the building without telling the doorman where you're going. You don't give this address to anyone, friends, employers, no one. If you need to get things from your old apartment, I'll send someone to collect them. You don't go back there yourselves. What about my jobs? Isabel asked. I work at a restaurant and a bookstore. If I don't show up, you'll call in sick. Take a week off. I'll compensate you for lost wages. Mr. Valenti, I can't keep accepting. Yes, you can, Dante said firmly. Isabel, those men knew where you lived, where you worked, where Sofia went to school. Until I'm certain they're gone and can't come back, you stay here, stay safe, and let me handle the logistics. Understood? Isabel wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could take care of herself and Sofia, that they didn't need this much help. But the truth was, she was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-tired, exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the past 7 hours was finally wearing off, leaving behind a weariness that made her knees weak. Understood, she whispered. Dante pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked at her again. I'm having Catherine arrange for clothes and basic necessities to be delivered tomorrow morning. Make a list of anything specific you need. Sofia's medications, toiletries, whatever. Text it to this number. He handed her a card with a phone number written on it. This is my direct line. You call it if anything, and I mean anything concerns you, day or night. You're giving me your direct number? You walked into my office and demanded I help you, Dante said with the ghost of a smile. I think we're past formality, don't you? Sofia emerged from the bedrooms, her eyes still red, but her expression less terrified. Isa, can I talk to you? Alone? Isabel followed her sister into the master bedroom, closing the door behind them. Sofia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap. Isa, she said quietly, I'm scared. Not just of what happened, but of him. Of Mr. Valenti. He's being nice now, but everyone knows what he is. What he does. What if this is all some kind of trap? What if he wants something from us? Isabel sat beside her sister, taking her hands. I thought about that too, baby. But here's what I know. Dante Valenti has a code. No civilians, no women, no children. His men broke that code when they took you, and he's genuinely furious about it. I watched him, Sofia. I saw his face when he realized what had happened. He was angry, but not at us. At them, for violating his rules. But people like him don't just help people for nothing, Sofia insisted. There has to be a price. Maybe, Isabel admitted. But right now, the price is staying in this apartment and being safe. And honestly, after watching you get thrown into that SUV, after spending 6 hours not knowing if you were alive or dead, I'll pay whatever price he asks if it means keeping you safe. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared, Isa. I kept thinking about Mom and Dad, about how they died and left us alone, and I thought I was going to die too, and you'd be all alone, and... Shh, baby, shh. Isabel pulled Sofia into her arms, holding her while she cried, stroking her hair the way their mother used to. You're safe now. We're both safe. And I promise you, I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, both of them crying for different reasons, for their parents who weren't here to protect them, for the innocence Sofia had lost today, for the life they'd had before this nightmare began. When they finally emerged from the bedroom, Dante was still in the living room, standing by the windows and talking quietly on his phone. He ended the call when he saw them. Everything okay? He asked. As okay as it can be, Isabel replied. Sofia's going to take a shower and try to get some rest. After Sofia disappeared into the bathroom, Isabel and Dante stood in awkward silence. There was so much Isabel wanted to say, so many questions she wanted to ask, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. You should rest too, Dante said, reading her expression. You've been running on adrenaline for hours. It's going to crash soon. I know, I can't turn my brain off. I keep replaying it, keep seeing Sofia get taken, keep thinking about what could have happened if... But it didn't, Dante interrupted gently. That's what matters. She's safe. You're safe. The men who took her are being dealt with. Focus on that, not on the what-ifs. Isabel nodded, knowing he was right, but unable to stop her mind from racing. What happens tomorrow? Do we just stay here? Wait? Tomorrow, I come back to check on you both. We'll discuss longer-term security arrangements. I'll have updates on Rico and the others, where they've been sent, what guarantees I've extracted that they won't return. We'll take it one day at a time. He moved toward the door, then paused. Isabel, what you did today, walking into my building, demanding I help you, that took extraordinary courage. Most people would have given up, accepted that the police weren't going to help, resigned themselves to losing Sofia. But you didn't. You fought for her. That's rare. She's my sister, Isabel said simply. What else was I going to do? Most people would have done nothing. Or worse, they would have done something stupid that got them killed. You did the smart thing. The brave thing. He smiled slightly. Your sister is lucky to have you. After Dante left, Isabel stood in the middle of the beautiful apartment, still processing everything that had happened. This morning, she'd been working her restaurant shift, worrying about making rent, planning how to scrape together money for Sofia's art supplies. Tonight, she was standing in a luxury apartment in Lincoln Park, under the protection of Chicago's most dangerous criminal, because her sister had witnessed something she shouldn't have seen. Life, Isabel reflected, could change in the span of a heartbeat. Sofia emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a plush robe, her wet hair hanging down her back. Isa, can I sleep in your room tonight? I don't want to be alone. Of course, baby. Come on. They curled up together in the king-sized bed, Sofia's head on Isabel's shoulder, both of them staring at the ceiling. "Isa," Sofia whispered into the darkness. "Do you think we can trust him? Mr. Valenti?" Isabel thought about Dante's face when he'd talked about his sister, about the cold fury when he'd confronted Rico and his partner, about the gentleness in his voice when he'd apologized to Sofia, about the way he'd given her his direct number and told her to call day or night if she needed anything. "I think," Isabel said slowly, "that he's a dangerous man who does terrible things. But I also think that when he makes a promise, he keeps it. And he promised to keep us safe. That's not exactly a yes." "No," Isabel admitted, "but it's the best I can do right now." Sofia was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He has sad eyes. Did you notice? Like he's seen too much bad stuff and can't forget it." Isabel had noticed. "Yeah, baby. He does." "I feel bad for him," Sofia said. "Is that weird? To feel bad for someone who's probably killed people?" "I don't think it's weird to recognize pain in someone else, regardless of who they are." They fell asleep like that, holding each other, both of them haunted by what had happened, but grateful to be together. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving Chicago's streets washed clean under the glow of streetlights. And somewhere in the city, Dante Valenti was making phone calls, giving orders, ensuring that Rico and his partner understood exactly how thoroughly they destroyed their lives, ensuring that every member of his organization knew what had happened and what the consequences were for breaking his rules, making sure that two sisters who'd stumbled into his world through no fault of their own would be protected, would be safe, would have the chance to heal and move forward. Because some rules, he'd learned long ago, were worth enforcing with everything you had, and protecting the innocent was the only rule that mattered. The next 5 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Isabel and Sofia existed in their luxury apartment like actors in a play, going through the motions of normal life while knowing nothing was normal anymore. Catherine arrived every morning with fresh pastries and updates from Dante. Rico and his partner had been relocated to Phoenix with severance packages and explicit instructions never to return to Chicago. Tony and Marco had been demoted, stripped of their positions, and reassigned to menial tasks that would keep them far from any operations involving civilians. The bodega operation had been shut down entirely, with Mr. Kim compensated for his cooperation and his silence. Everything was being handled. Everything was being controlled. And yet Isabel couldn't shake the feeling that she and Sofia were pieces on a chessboard, being moved by forces they didn't fully understand. Dante came by each evening, ostensibly to check on their security and provide updates. But Isabel noticed how his visits grew longer each night, how he'd linger in the living room, accepting coffee, asking Sofia about her artwork, listening with genuine interest as she showed him her portfolio. "You're really talented," Dante said on the 4th night, studying a digital illustration Sofia had created on the tablet Catherine had provided. "This composition, the way you've used light and shadow, it's sophisticated. Professional quality." Sofia beamed under his praise. She'd been wary of him at first, but something about Dante's quiet intensity and genuine interest in her work had broken through her fear. Now she treated him almost like an uncle, someone safe to be excited around. "I want to study graphic design at the Art Institute," Sofia explained, pulling up more of her work. "They have this amazing program that combines traditional art with digital media, and I've already been accepted with a full scholarship. But I'd need to cover living expenses and supplies, and Isa's been working so hard to save up." "Sofia," Isabel interrupted gently, "I'm sure Mr. Valenti doesn't need to hear about our financial planning." "Actually," Dante said, his eyes still on Sofia's portfolio, "I'm very interested." He looked at Isabel. "Can we talk? Privately?" They moved to the kitchen while Sofia continued working on her tablet. Dante leaned against the counter, his tie loosened after a long day, and Isabel was struck by how different he looked in these moments. Less the dangerous crime lord, more just a man who was tired. "I want to pay for Sofia's education," Dante said without preamble. Isabel's stomach dropped. "What? No, absolutely not." "Why not?" Because you've already done too much. The apartment, the security, the clothes, the food. We can't keep taking from you, especially not something as significant as college tuition. You're not taking. I'm offering." Dante's voice was calm, reasonable. "Isabel, your sister has genuine talent. The kind of talent that deserves to be nurtured, developed, given every opportunity to flourish. And she's been through trauma because of my organization. The least I can do is ensure that trauma doesn't derail her future. This isn't your responsibility. Isabel insisted, even as part of her desperately wanted to say yes, to accept this impossible gift. Sofia being taken wasn't your fault. It was Rico's fault, and it was my organization, Dante interrupted. My people, operating under my authority, however misguided their actions. That makes it my responsibility. He moved closer, and Isabel caught the scent of his cologne, expensive and subtle. I know you're afraid of owing me something. Afraid that if you accept this, there will be a price you can't pay. But I'm not asking for anything except the chance to do something good with the resources I have. Why? Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why does it matter to you so much? Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain. Because my sister never got the chance to go to college, never got to pursue her dreams or become who she was meant to be, because she was destroyed by men like the ones I employ, and I couldn't save her. His dark eyes met Isabel's. I can't bring her back, but I can make sure Sofia gets everything my sister never had. Let me do that, please. The raw honesty in his voice undid something in Isabel's chest. She'd been so focused on protecting herself and Sofia from potential manipulation, from hidden prices and delayed consequences, that she hadn't considered the simplest explanation. Dante Valenti was a man haunted by his failures, trying to save someone else's sister because he couldn't save his own. Okay, Isabel said softly. Okay, but I need something in return. Dante's eyebrow raised slightly. What? I need to understand what this is. What we are. You show up here every night. You bring Sofia gifts. You talk to her about art and college and the future. You look at me like... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. I need to know what you want from us, Dante. Not just the official story about security and responsibility. The truth. Dante moved to the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering in the darkness. The truth is, I haven't felt like this in a long time. Maybe ever. Felt like what? Like there's something in my life worth protecting that isn't about power or money or control. He turned back to face her. My world is violence, Isabel. It's negotiations and threats, and carefully calculated moves designed to maintain an empire built on fear. I spend my days making decisions that affect hundreds of lives, most of them for the worse. And then I come here, and Sofia shows me her artwork with genuine excitement, and you make coffee that's terrible, but you make it anyway. Hey, my coffee isn't that bad, Isabel protested weakly. It's awful, Dante said, but he was smiling. And somehow that matters to me more than it should. You both matter to me more than you should. Sofia because she reminds me of everything good that still exists in this world. And you? He moved closer, close enough that Isabel had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You walked into my building terrified but determined, willing to face down one of the most dangerous men in Chicago to save your sister. You're brilliant and brave, and you make me want to be someone better than who I am. Isabel's breath caught. Dante, I know it's complicated, he continued. I know my life isn't compatible with normal things like relationships and dating and everything you deserve, but I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to be here in this apartment with you and Sofia. Can't stop imagining what it would be like if this wasn't temporary, if you didn't leave after a week or a month, if you stayed. You're asking me to stay? Isabel's voice shook. I'm asking if you'd consider it. Not just in this apartment, but in my life. You and Sofia both. He reached out, his hand gentle on her cheek. I can give you safety, security, everything you've been struggling for, Sofia's education, a future without working 2 jobs, without worrying about making rent. And in return... In return, what? Isabel asked, even though part of her already knew the answer. In return, you let me be part of your lives. You let me protect you, provide for you, care about you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You let me try to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. Isabel should have said no, should have recognized this for what it was, a dangerous entanglement with a man whose world was built on violence and crime. Should have remembered that fairy tales about mobsters with hearts of gold were fiction, that real life didn't work like this. But when she looked into Dante's eyes, she saw something that looked like hope. And she remembered how he'd dropped everything to help her find Sofia, how he'd been gentle with her sister, how he'd kept every promise he'd made. I need time, Isabel said finally, to think about what this means, what it would mean for Sofia, how to navigate, everything. Take all the time you need, Dante said. I'm not going anywhere. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Isabel found herself rising on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was soft, almost tentative, nothing like she'd expected from a man as powerful as Dante Valenti. It tasted like possibility and danger in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Sofia's voice called from the living room, "Are you guys kissing? Because that would be weird but also kind of sweet, and I don't know how to feel about it." Isabel laughed despite herself, pressing her forehead against Dante's chest. "We should probably have a conversation with her about this." "Probably," Dante agreed. "Though I suspect she's more observant than we. Give her credit for." They returned to the living room to find Sofia watching them with knowing eyes. "So you guys are together now? Dating? What's the official term when one person is a regular human and the other person runs half of Chicago's underworld?" "Sofia," Isabel started, but Dante held up a hand. "No, it's a fair question." He sat down on the couch, his posture open, non-threatening. "Sofia, I want to be honest with you about what I do and who I am. Your sister deserves that honesty, and so do you." For the next hour, Dante explained his world in terms that were frank but not gratuitously detailed. He talked about his organization, about the gray areas between legal and illegal, about the reality that some people fell through society's cracks and needed protection that the law couldn't or wouldn't provide. He was careful not to glorify it, but he didn't apologize for it either. Sofia listened with the intensity she brought to everything, asking questions that were surprisingly insightful for a 17-year-old. "So you're basically like Batman, but without the costume and with more actual crime?" Sofia asked finally. Dante laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "That's one interpretation. And you want to what? Date my sister? Take care of us? Make sure I go to college?" Sofia's eyes narrowed. "What happens if you and Isa break up? Do we lose everything? Do we end up back in our old apartment or worse?" "No," Dante said firmly. "Whatever happens between your sister and me, my commitment to your education doesn't change. You're going to the Art Institute, Sofia. That's not conditional on anything except you working hard and pursuing your dreams." "He means it," Isabel added quietly. "I've watched him these past few days. When Dante Valenti makes a promise, he keeps it." Sofia studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but Isa, you have to promise me something. Anything, baby. Promise me you're doing this because you want to. Not just because it's convenient or safe, or because he's offering to pay for my school. Promise me you actually have feelings for him." Isabel looked at Dante, at the way he was watching her with those dark, intense eyes, at the careful way he held himself, giving her space to answer honestly. She thought about the past 5 days, about how he'd shown up every evening without fail, about how he'd listened when she talked about her parents, about how he'd made Sofia laugh even when she'd been crying about nightmares. "I promise," Isabel said. "I wouldn't do this if I didn't have feelings for him." 3 weeks later, Isabel and Sofia moved out of the Lincoln Park apartment and into Dante's penthouse. It had been Dante's suggestion, made carefully one evening over dinner. "I have more space than I know what to do with. 3 bedrooms, each with their own bathroom. Sofia would have room for an art studio. You'd have privacy, security, and—" He'd paused, something vulnerable entering his expression. "I'd have the 2 of you close." The penthouse was stunning, occupying the top 2 floors of the same building where Isabel had first met Dante. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Chicago, and every detail spoke of careful design and expensive taste. But what struck Isabel most was how Dante had prepared for them. Sofia's room had been converted into a combination bedroom and art studio, with professional-grade equipment, a drafting table positioned to catch the best natural light, and storage for all her supplies. Isabel's room was elegant but comfortable, with a reading nook by the window and a walk-in closet that made her laugh at the absurdity of it all. "I know it's a lot," Dante said, watching nervously as they explored. "If anything isn't to your liking, we can change it. This is your home now. I want you to feel comfortable." "Comfortable?" Isabel repeated, running her hand along the marble kitchen counter. "Dante, this place is worth more than everything I've owned in my entire life combined." "Then you deserve an upgrade." Life settled into a new rhythm. Sofia started at the Art Institute, thriving under the instruction of professors who recognized her talent. Isabel, freed from the crushing weight of working 2 jobs, enrolled in night classes to finish her own degree, business management, something she'd abandoned when their parents died, and she'd had to support Sofia. And Dante was there, a constant presence in their lives. He attended Sofia's art shows, sitting in the back with Isabel, watching with pride as collectors praised her work. He helped Isabel study for exams, his mind sharp enough to grasp complex business concepts and explain them in ways that made sense. He introduced them to his world carefully, making it clear that they were under his protection, that anyone who threatened them would answer to him personally. But it wasn't all smooth. There were moments when Isabel was reminded sharply of who Dante was and what he did. Like the night she overheard a phone conversation, Dante's voice cold and flat as he discussed handling a problem with someone who'd betrayed the organization. Or the evening when he came home with blood on his shirt cuff, his expression distant and hard until he saw her and Sofia, and something in his face softened. "Is this what our life will be like?" Isabel asked him one night after Sofia had gone to bed. They were on the penthouse's rooftop terrace, the city spread out below them like a carpet of lights. "You disappearing to handle problems? Coming back with violence in your eyes?" "Yes," Dante said honestly. "I can't change what I do, Isabel. I can protect you from it, keep you separate from the worst of it, but I can't pretend my world isn't dark. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking if you can live in both worlds, the one where you do terrible things, and the one where you come home to me and Sofia and try to be someone different." Dante pulled her close, his arms around her waist. "I'm already living in both worlds. Every day, I make decisions that hurt people, that destroy lives, and every night, I come home to you, and you make me remember that there's more to existence than power and control. You make me want to be better, even if I can never fully be good." "I don't need you to be good," Isabel said, tilting her face up to look at him. "I need you to be honest, to never lie to me about what you do or who you are. Can you promise me that?" "I promise. No lies, no sugarcoating. You'll always know exactly who you're choosing to be with." 6 months after they moved into the penthouse, Dante proposed, not with a grand gesture or a public display, but quietly on an ordinary Tuesday evening while they were cooking dinner together. Sofia was at a study group, and Isabel was chopping vegetables while Dante worked on the sauce, and he just stopped mid-stir and said, "Marry me." Isabel's knife clattered to the cutting board. "What?" "Marry me," Dante repeated, setting down the spoon and turning to face her fully. "I know it's unconventional. I know my life is complicated and dangerous, and not what you probably imagined for yourself. But I love you, Isabel. I love how strong you are, how you fight for the people you care about, how you make me want to be someone worthy of you. And I love Sofia like she's my own sister, like she's the second chance I never thought I'd get. Marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life protecting both of you." Isabel stared at him, her mind racing. Marriage to Dante Valenti would mean fully committing to this life, to this world. It would mean accepting that the man she loved was also a criminal, that their future would always involve security concerns and dangerous enemies, and the knowledge that violence was never far away. But it would also mean safety for Sofia, a real future for both of them, and waking up every morning next to a man who looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. "Ask Sofia first," Isabel said finally. "She deserves to have a say in this. If we're going to be a family, she needs to agree." Dante smiled, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Inside were 2 rings, an engagement ring with a diamond that probably cost more than a car, and a smaller, delicate band with Sofia's birthstone. "I already asked her," Dante admitted. 3 days ago. She said yes, but only if you did. Said she trusted you to make the right choice for both of you." Isabel laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You asked my 17-year-old sister for permission to propose? She's part of this family. Her opinion matters." "Yes," Isabel said, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. The complicated life, the dangerous world, the future we'll build together. Yes." The wedding was small, held in the penthouse with only a handful of people present. Catherine served as Isabel's maid of honor, her stern expression softening as she helped Isabel into a simple but elegant dress. Sofia was the flower girl again, taking the job with the same seriousness she'd brought to her role in Isabel's imagination of a perfect future. Marcus stood as Dante's best man, along with Vincent and a few other members of Dante's organization who'd proven their loyalty 1,000 times over. No press, no publicity, just a quiet ceremony that bound together a family that had been forged in crisis and grown in unexpected ways. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Sofia raised her hand exactly as she had in Isabel's imagination. "Yes," Sofia said, and everyone froze. Then she grinned. "I object to not having cake soon. Can we do the cake part now?" The room erupted in laughter, and Dante scooped Sofia up in a hug that lifted her off her feet. Soon, princess. Let us finish getting married first. Okay, but the cake better be chocolate. It is. Would I forget your favorite? Never. You're the best almost brother ever. Years later, when Sofia was a successful graphic designer with her own studio, and Isabel was managing several of Dante's legitimate business operations, they'd look back on that night in the rain when everything changed. Do you ever regret it? Sofia would ask during one of their sister dinners, just the two of them, no husbands or kids or chaos. Walking into that building, demanding that a mafia boss help you? Isabel would think about the question seriously, considering the life they'd built, the safety they'd gained, but also the complications. The knowledge of what Dante did, the occasional reminders that their world operated by different rules than most people's. No, she'd say finally, because the alternative was losing you, and everything else. The complexity, the danger, the moral gray areas, it's all worth it to know you're safe and happy and living the life you deserve. Even though he's, a criminal. Even though. Because he's also the man who dropped everything to help me find you, who kept every promise he ever made, who loves us both fiercely enough to be better than he would have been otherwise. Isabel would smile. Sometimes the monsters turn out to be heroes, Sof. Sometimes the scariest person in the room is exactly who you need. But that night, the night of the wedding, they didn't know about the future yet. They only knew that they'd found each other through desperation and terror, and they'd chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. As Isabel and Dante danced their first dance as husband and wife, Sofia watching from the sidelines with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face, Dante leaned down and whispered in Isabel's ear, "Thank you for trusting me, for choosing me, for letting me be part of your family. Thank you for answering when I came looking for help," Isabel whispered back. "Thank you for being the kind of man who would drop everything for a desperate woman and her missing sister. Always," Dante promised. "For you and Sofia. Always." The music played on, and Chicago's skyline glittered beyond the windows, and somewhere in the building below, Marcus and Vincent stood guard, ensuring that this fragile, imperfect, beautiful family would stay safe. Because some promises were worth keeping with everything you had, and some families, the ones forged in fire and sealed with trust, were worth protecting above all else. Isabel had tugged on a mafia boss's sleeve and begged him to find her sister. What he'd done next had shocked her, not with violence, though that had come later for the men who'd taken Sofia, but with genuine care, with commitment, with love. And in return, she'd given him something he'd never thought he'd have, a family to come home to, a reason to be better, a future that held more than power and violence. They'd saved each other, really. And that, Isabel reflected as she danced with her husband while her sister wiped away happy tears, was the best kind of love story. The kind where broken people found each other and decided to be whole together. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.